The numbers say 44 million visitors, but walk through the streets of Tsim Sha Tsui on a Tuesday afternoon and you will feel something that no government statistic can explain. The shops are open, the lights are on, and almost nobody is spending a single dollar. That is the central paradox eating Hong Kong alive. This is not a story about a city that lost its tourists. This is a story about a city that kept getting visitors and lost everything else anyway. It is the story of how one of the most visited, most photographed, most celebrated metropolises in human history managed to hollow itself out from the inside while the world kept booking flights there. And it is a story that begins not with a pandemic, not with a protest, but with something far older and far more ruthless, the moment a city stops being itself. Let us go back. Because to understand what Hong Kong is today, you have to understand what it once was. And the magnitude of what has been lost. In 2018, Hong Kong was untouchable. That year, the city welcomed 65.1 million visitor arrivals, more than the entire population of France walking through one city in a single year. Tourists didn't just visit Hong Kong. They pilgrimed to it. They came for the neon-soaked streets of Mong Kok, for the double-decker trams rattling through Central, for the night markets of Temple Street where you could bargain for jade, electronics, and knock-off Rolexes while the harbor glittered behind you like a fever dream of capitalism at its most electric. They came for the shopping. Louis Vuitton, Cartier, Patek Philippe, Chanel, Rolex. The luxury houses of Europe set up their grandest Asian flagships here. Not in Paris, not in Milan, but in Hong Kong, because this was where the money came. Mainland Chinese tourists, in particular, treated Hong Kong like their personal luxury emporium. In 2018, mainland visitors spent on a scale that defied imagination. The city's retail sector captured over half, 51%, of all tourist expenditure. Shops specializing in watches, jewelry, and handbags ran perpetually at capacity. The streets of Causeway Bay were so crowded with shoppers on weekends that walking in a straight line was genuinely difficult. Retail staff worked overtime. Hotels ran at maximum occupancy. Restaurants in tourist districts had waiting lists stretching for hours. Hong Kong in 2018 was not just a city, it was a machine. A perfectly calibrated, high-velocity luxury dispensing machine that had been running without pause for decades. And when a machine like that is running at full speed, nobody stops to ask what would happen if it broke. The first fracture came from the streets. In June 2019, a proposed extradition bill ignited one of the largest protest movements in Hong Kong's history. At its peak, nearly 2 million people marched. An almost incomprehensible proportion of the population. The images went around the world, rivers of people in black, umbrellas raised against tear gas, the skyline forming a surreal backdrop to scenes of confrontation never seen before. Tourism did not collapse immediately, but the tremors began. Visitor numbers slipped in the second half of 2019 as global media coverage intensified. Mainland Chinese tourists began to hesitate, and Western travelers redirected their plans to Tokyo, Seoul, Singapore, and Bangkok. The machine was still running, but you could hear the grinding. Then came Beijing's response. On June 30, 2020, the national security law was imposed on Hong Kong. Drafted in secret and inserted directly into the Basic Law, it fundamentally altered the city's legal reality overnight. By 2024, more than 290 people had been arrested under the law. Over 58 civil society organizations disbanded. The press changed. Apple Daily was shut down, and its founder Jimmy Lai became the international face of a city being quietly dismantled. Then came the exodus. Between 2020 and early 2024, more than 410,000 residents left Hong Kong. Many were young, educated professionals, the very people who powered the city's economy and cultural life. This was not a random departure. It was a surgical removal of human capital. These were the entrepreneurs, creatives, finance professionals, and service workers who made the city vibrant, not just for residents, but for visitors. And this matters. Because the soul of a tourist destination is not its landmarks. It is its people. When the people leave, what remains is infrastructure without spirit. A stage set with no actors. Then came the pandemic, and whatever the protests and policies began, COVID-19 finished with ruthless efficiency. Then came the pandemic, and whatever the protests and policies began, COVID-19 finished with ruthless efficiency. Hong Kong imposed some of the strictest travel restrictions in the world. While other cities reopened, Hong Kong maintained long quarantine requirements that made travel impractical. In 2021, the city recorded just 604,000 visitors, a catastrophic collapse. Airlines cut routes. Hotels sat empty. Restaurants closed. Entire districts went silent. When restrictions finally lifted, the recovery began. In 2023, arrivals reached 33.9 million. In 2024, they climbed to 44.5 million. On paper, it looked like a comeback. But here is the paradox: more visitors, but less spending. Tourist spending dropped sharply. Retail sales declined. Luxury purchases collapsed. The average mainland visitor spent far less than before. Hong Kong was no longer a shopping destination, it was becoming a stopover. Visitors came, took photos, ate a meal, and left. Meanwhile, competition surged. Shenzhen, just minutes away, offered modern malls, better prices, and growing appeal. Other Asian cities became cheaper and more attractive. At the same time, Hong Kong became more expensive due to its currency pegged to the US dollar. The result? The very economic engine that powered Hong Kong's tourism, high-spending shoppers, began to disappear. Retail declined month after month. Luxury stores closed. Office vacancies rose. Foreign companies scaled back. The city still looked the same, but its economic core had shifted. The government responded with events, campaigns, and promotions. Concerts, festivals, and sports tournaments brought temporary spikes in visitors. But events cannot replace identity. They create noise, but not depth. The deeper issue remains: Hong Kong's competitive advantages, its openness, its global identity, its cultural energy, have been fundamentally altered. And that is what tourists feel, even if they cannot explain it. The skyline is still there. The harbor still shines. The food is still world-class. But something essential is missing. Hong Kong is not dead. It is still alive, still impressive, still worth visiting. But it is quieter. More cautious. Less electric. The machine is running again, but it is not the same machine. And if you stand still long enough in those famous streets, you can hear the difference. So here is the question. Can Hong Kong find a third act? Or are we watching the slow transformation of a global city into something that looks the same, but operates by a completely different logic?